For Monday, September 11th. Before we start, we'd like to acknowledge that this council meeting is being held on the homeland of the Ktunaxa people. And can I get a motion to adopt the agenda for the regular council meeting of Monday, September 11th, 2023? Council Bassett, seconded by Councilor Stetsky. All in favor? Carried. And can I get a motion to adopt the following minutes for the regular council meeting of Monday, July 10th, 2023, and the special council meeting of Tuesday, August 8th, 2023? Councilor Popoff, seconded by Councilor Ray. All in favor? Carried. Tonight we do have a delegation. I'd like to welcome Rob Morrison, our Member of Parliament for the Kootenay Columbia, is here tonight to discuss a summary of the federal budget, new federal programs, and update on legislation and potential federal grant opportunities. Welcome, Rob. The floor is yours.
Thank you, councillors. Thank you, Acting Mayor Mike. And also thank you, Your Worship, from Zoom for being here tonight. I was asked today to talk about funding programs that can assist municipalities like Cranbrook. And I just want you to know that all the programs I'm going to talk about, I'll meet with your CFO, your Chief Financial Officer, make sure that we capitalize on all the programs that are available to Cranbrook. I've divided it into three groups: housing, infrastructure, and green spaces. On the housing, the federal, and I'll only talk about federal resources, I won't be talking about provincial resources at all. The FCM has a green municipality fund called Funding Opportunities. And in there's two capital projects. One is new construction of sustainable affordable housing. This supports the construction of new affordable housing projects with higher environmental performance standards. And the second one is a capital project, which is a retrofit of sustainable affordable housing. This supports refitting existing affordable housing. CMHC, so the Canada Mortgage and Housing Corporation, also has funding opportunities, and they provide funds to support full or renovatable homes. There's two there. One is Affordable Housing Initiative Fund, and the other is the Rental Construction Financing Initiative. And that supports construction of rental units during the riskiest phase of development. With infrastructure, the federal resources, the Canada Community Building Fund is a program with source of funding offered twice a year. And it is where you as the Cranbrook municipality would apply through UBCM for that fund. The Infrastructure Canada, that's green and inclusive community buildings. And this program provides funding for applicants for green accessible repairs, upgrades, and retrofits of public community buildings. The FCM, also has a green municipal fund, and it has three phases that it has. One is a capital project, GHG impact retrofit, and this initiative seeks to reduce greenhouse gas emissions by at least 30% through retrofitting a community building. There's a community building recommissioning grant, and this initiative seeks to optimize energy performance of recreation or cultural buildings. And there's sustainable neighborhood action plan. And this initiative supports the creation of plans for sustainable development at the neighborhood scale. The Canada Infrastructure Bank is an impact investor deploying $35 billion to develop the next generation of infrastructure for Canadians. It's identified as a priority sector. There's also the Canada Heritage, which is a Canada Cultural Spaces Fund. And this program supports projects which improve physical spaces for arts, heritage, culture, and creative innovation. Employment and Social Development Canada has an Enabling Accessibility Fund. This program supports projects that increases accessibility with persons with disabilities to be able to participate in community activities, programs, services. There's three. It's divided into three parts. The youth component, which is a youth-led projects of values of up to $10,000. A small projects component, which is up to $57,950. And a mid-sized projects component that funds large projects which could exceed $350,000 to $1 million per project. Eligible projects may include renovations, the installation of accessible doors, washrooms, elevators. There's a farm credit program, which is Agri-Spirit. This program supports projects by a variety of rural municipalities, towns, and cities of less than 150,000. It provides funds in a variety of projects, including ones related to infrastructure. municipalities can see there's a list of the successful applicants. In fact, Cranbrook Community Connection were successful in 2022 in this program. Now, finally, there's a green spaces. The Natural Resources Canada has a 2 billion tree program. The fund provides projects that plant trees as part of the federal commitment to reduce greenhouse gas emissions through planting of trees. This program has multiple streams, including urban, suburban stream for planting. There's also the FCM has a green municipal fund, has funding opportunities, and it's divided into 3 groups. There's a study, a signature initiative, and this supports the studies of the transformation of environmental projects. There's a pilot project, a signature initiative, and this initiative supports transformation of pilot projects which seek to reduce greenhouse gas emissions and protect air, water, and land. And there's a capital project signature initiative, and this is transformation of capital projects which reduce greenhouse gas emissions, protect air, water, and land. The Farm Credit Program also has a green spaces avenue as well, and it supports a variety of rural and municipalities, again, of less than 150,000. So those are the rundown of some of the federal programs that have funding available. Again, I think it's important that I work with your CFO to see what opportunities are available for Cranbrook, and I'm open to any questions you might have.
Perfect. Thank you. We'll start off with Councillor Stetsky.
Thank you very much, Rob, for being here and for your presentation. Over the last 2 years, I know you've attended a couple of meetings focused on people living rough or homeless people in Cranbrook and housing. When you look down that list, what programs, and I know a lot of it's provincial, but what programs do you think might be most helpful to Cranbrook, and how can you help us get hold of some of that money?
Yeah, and I think it's really important that the federal government in their housing initiatives start to actually maybe listen to some of our communities like Cranbrook who are suffering because we do not have housing available for our homeless. And I think a lot of people have to realize that the homeless isn't just people who are suffering from opioid addictions, that there's a lot of homeless people with mental health issues. There's a huge variety of why people are out there. And right now we're struggling federally with getting some good initiatives that show where we've made results. We're not result driven at this time, and our focus when I go back next week will be to work with the government and try and encourage them to look at areas like Cranbrook to provide funding where we can show results. So I know in the municipal world it's shovel-ready projects, and I know if I work with the CFO, we have shovel-ready projects in Cranbrook. So let's get the funding for that.
Great, good question. Councillor Popoff.
Thanks, Rob. In your presentation, you were using the word repetitively a few times of affordable housing. So is there some criteria for what that affordable housing is? Are we talking about the socially subsidized housing, the missing middle workforce housing? Is there some sort of criteria around those affordable housing pieces?
Yeah, great question, Councillor. The affordable, you're right, affordable is not a $750,000 house, even though we might be able to build it for 600. Now that's still not affordable. So the affordability is certainly dependent on where you live and how do we build affordable housing. And maybe I was talking to a fellow today, maybe the 2,500 square foot house just isn't affordable. So maybe we're down to 690 square feet and building homes that people can get into at a rate of $200,000 versus at $600,000, or even better yet, how about affordable rental? So because of course that has another effect on it. And I did work with a group out of Revelstoke that had their affordable housing was really tiny homes on an acre plot where they had multiple homes, and they're all 690 one-bedroom type homes with a community garden in the area and beautiful homes, but they weren't able to sell them. People weren't able to buy them to flip them. And I think that's part of our problem is the wealthier people can afford these homes, even though they're affordable, and then it makes it unaffordable for someone who's trying to buy them. But really, I think one of our biggest problems is we got to think rental to get people into homes to start with before we start looking at buying.
Excellent. And just to follow up, we will be completing our second housing strategy report. So hopefully we'll share that with you as well, so you're aware of Cranbrook circumstances.
Great. Councillor Graham.
Thank you, your acting worship, acting mayor. Just maybe one question, MP Morrison, you brought up, and maybe staff might know a bit about this. You mentioned the accessibility fund, and we're currently working on that program with the city. Are we aware of some of the grant opportunities federally around accessibility, or are we going to work on tapping into that, or are we just not at that stage yet with where we're at in our research on accessibility?
Councillor Graham, through your acting worship or acting mayor. Yes, we are aware of those. We do have a pretty robust program where any of these new opportunities do come forward, and then we do review them as staff. I know a lot of that is in conjunction with the DEI framework that will be provided a little bit with council later. Much of those opportunities aren't directly in our purview, but I know we've been working with our recreation and culture staff to look at a lot of those accessibility items that are related to the building, and a lot of them are related to the building funds. So that's a great opportunity for us, and it's been identified as something that we can tackle fairly quickly. And then as we go into some more of the public infrastructure, we're hoping to incorporate some of those items when we're looking at, streets, walkways, and our active transportation framework is also going to be incorporating those, and hopefully see some funding opportunities.
Great. Thank you. Any further questions? Okay. Yes, sorry, Rob.
Yeah, just in conclusion, just so everybody here knows, the housing issue is not a partisan issue. When I go back to Ottawa, it's all hands up. We're all trying to get the same results. It doesn't matter whether you live in Newfoundland, Ontario, or Cranbrook. We're all trying to get to the same end, and that is to help people get into some housing.
Great. Thank you. So Rob, thank you so much for your presentation. You provided a lot of information, and if it's possible to get a copy for staff of these funds available, that'd be fantastic. Okay, thank you. Okay, moving on to bylaws. Our first bylaw is item 6.1. The first bylaw for consideration tonight is official community amendment plan, bylaw number 4124, 2023, regarding Oasis at the Dunes. This bylaw is for first reading tonight. Can I please have Engineering Development Services provide a brief overview of the report?
Hi, good evening, Acting Mayor and Council. Tonight, I'm presenting an application we've received from Howarth Development Consulting on behalf of the owners for the property known as Oasis at the Dunes. The lands lie within the east side of what would be the former Shadow Mountain development. The application before us involves a total of 3 parcels, and they're basically proposing to amend the neighborhood plan and adjust the housing typology chart. From the original vision, there was initial vision of the types of housing and the forms of housing they wanted, and so subsequent ownership changes have changed. So this current developer, who's the primary landholder on the east side, is looking at changing these designations to look at creating a new distribution of home types, that being 156 single-family detached and 2-family residential, with the option for an additional 19 future strata single-family, and up to 118 multifamily sites. And the development plan is going to be proposing to redesignate the lands primarily from what would be the estate single family, which were kind of based on large lot single family, to the new designations being the low density residential, low density multifamily, and medium density residential, with the ultimate goal of the proposal at this point being on the I guess would be the 3 parcels combined, 10 single family lots, 18 duplexes, 54 townhomes, and approximately 60 condo units. And with the installation of the utilities, these would be serviced with the community water and sewer. And so this amendment would allow them to, or would allow, I guess, council to consider the forthcoming zoning amendment to the changes to the zoning bylaw to facilitate this development that's being proposed.
Great, thank you. Now, can I get a motion that council give first reading to City of Cranbrook Official Community Plan Amendment Bylaw number 4124, 2023, and authorize staff to undertake public consultation on the proposed amendment? Moved by Councillor Popoff, seconded by Councillor Ray. Discussion. Okay, Councillor Bissett.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I had a question about, it said 60 condo units. So I saw townhouse units before that. So what are we looking at here as far as a building type? Is that like a 4-story building or?
Through the acting mayor to council, that's my understanding, but the full development plans haven't been provided to us.
Oh,
But
okay.
being that terminology we're using, I would envision that it would be more of a multi-story condo unit and then the townhomes.
I see.
Similar to what we're potentially going to be seeing in, would be the Parnaby lands.
Okay.
So just a mix of different housing types of all kinds. And the 60 condo units would be on the parcel identified on the map as known as F, or on the location map is the lot 1.
Okay.
So it's kind of the long skinny lot.
Okay.
Yeah.
Can I add? to that?
Yes, please.
I was also wondering, because this is in an area near the water, that's, valuable for wildlife, is there going to be provision in there for wildlife corridors for deer, elk, even bears in that area?
So originally when this development started, they had actually undertaken a lot of the development permits required for the environmentally sensitive area. And a lot of those corridors are actually already protected by a restrictive covenant. So these are largely would be the development lands that don't form part of that. But if given that this is sort of a change in scope of development from the original vision, I would suspect we'll be requiring them to do updated development permits. I think we have the power to do that, and certainly I'll be discussing that with the developer, because it's different than what was proposed in 2007 or 8 or whenever that was. And so those adjustments could be made if needed, but certainly an original development permit for wildfire, environmentally sensitive area, steep slopes, geotechnical were all done back in the original phases of development. And so a lot of the areas do have restrictive covenants on them. There are certain restrictions on some lands where you can build, where you can't build, those kinds of things. So we'll be looking at that as we progress as well, to see if there's additional changes that need to be made to those original development permits.
Great. Anyone else? Councillor Popoff? Oh, sorry, Councillor Stetsky.
Thank you. And again, just on principle, I can't support a development, including additional density in a place that's 14 kilometers away from downtown Cranbrook. It does not fit with smart growth principles, and so I'll be voting against this.
Okay, Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor. A little more densification is what I'm understanding in general from an existing zone piece of property. Where will be the access point onto the highway? Will it be via Parnaby Road or some other access point? And are we concerned about this extra load of vehicles eventually when it gets built out?
So again, through the acting mayor to council, this development's access is going to be primarily Parnaby Road. And the applicants are actively working with ourselves in the Ministry of Transportation and doing their traffic impact assessment updates. And they're actually, I believe, if Curtis can correct me if I'm wrong, but they're already in preliminary design stages for the necessary highway upgrades that'll be required because of this development. And so what we have spoken to the agent with very recently was that, and the Ministry of Transportation, that with the advent of the change in density, their original TIAs, I don't believe it identified those. So they're amending the TIAs to accommodate for what's being proposed new, and then that'll ultimately affect what improvements might be required.
Excellent. So that might be a win. Then it'll further accelerate the decision on what needs to happen at that intersection of Parnaby Road, i.e. a traffic light of some sort.
Correct. Yeah, they're looking at various options to meet ministry standards.
Thanks, Rob.
Yeah.
Hey, Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Rob, I'm wondering if you could speak to, there's existing infrastructure costs based on the housing that's already there. And when you're looking at increases in density, how does that then affect, those infrastructure costs that are in effect already there?
So I suppose, I guess what I'll do is I can turn it over to Curtis with respect to how it would work from the local area service perspective with respect to the new sewer line going in. But generally, the cost would be divvied up amongst all the different units. essentially for the servicing. But I mean, from the sort of the asset management thing, and I'm going to put on Mike's hat a little bit here with my general knowledge, is that ultimately, you know, with more units will bring more taxation, which will bring, you know, additional funding that will hopefully help with respect to those assets in the future. And so, and interesting, I mean, it's an increase in density, but it's only about 181 units compared to what they originally proposed. So, you know, there's 300 before, and they were all based around large lot, single family homes. And so, you know, they're looking at development that, you know, from a planning perspective, you know, smaller footprints, better utilization of land, but also infrastructure and assets. And so, you know, I would hope that at some point, you know, I don't know if this would be necessarily call it enough density to pay for every dime 20, 40 years down the road, but certainly the increase in density will help offset those costs because you will have that extra taxation.
Thank you.
Okay. Councillor Graham and then Mayor Price.
Thank you. I'm just feverishly scribbling down my thoughts. I remember just two questions. One is when you were talking a bit earlier in regards to Councillor Blissette's question, and you'd mentioned that most of the areas and the corridors like Wildlife Corridor or Steep Slope have already been identified, but you're saying it could open up again. We could go back to that. What would trigger that? And if that is triggered, does that happen right away so the developer now knows that they're losing more land if it's triggered, or is this halfway through and now it's a surprise? Right.
So initial discussions with the applicants is we've been actively looking at all the restrictive covenants. And I suspect most of them are probably going to stand as they are, but it's certainly something we're working with through even this initial phase. And they are aware of all the development permit requirements. Certainly, you know, as an example, we just very recently released the DPs for the Parnaby Road project for both environmentally sensitive and wildfire, for example. That was a new greenfield site. So basically, we're just going to take a look at the covenants and the original development permits. And like I said, from my recollection and understanding, these lands were already development lands, so that stuff should be accounted for. But if it's not, then certainly we'll be working with them through the development permit process. And it would likely just be an amendment to what would be the original DPs if there are any changes.
Okay,
Yeah.
and then just my other question, when you were talking about the traffic impact assessment or TIA, what is the scope of that? And as Councillor Popoff mentioned, they go, oh well, maybe there's just an intersection or there's a lighted Parnaby, and how does that play into other traffic impact assessments along that highway corridor, whether it be Echo Field and further down towards the community? Should we maybe do this in unison versus a couple different ones? How do we handle and manage that when it comes to these intersections along the highway that are going to be experiencing more traffic with growth and development? Sure.
And I would let Mike take over because you had this discussion.
Yeah, that's a great question, Councillor Graham, through the acting mayor. That's something that we've been talking about a lot over the last, really several weeks. That we've seen multiple changes in prospective developments or developable lands along that area, and the current process is, it's driven through the Ministry of Transportation and their requirements within proximity to the highway, and we found that those processes are becoming a little bit cumbersome for the development potential along that area. And so what we've been trying to do recently, and there's some agenda items a little bit later with advocating for some looking at that corridor, is we're going to be sitting down hopefully with the Ministry of Transportation talking about doing more of a comprehensive corridor study along that section to get a better picture of what that final end product would be, for a fully developed corridor. And then look at working backwards on how each developer or developable property may contribute to it, to make sure that it's looked at more comprehensively from a safety perspective, but also make sure that the burden of doing these impact assessments aren't one-offs per development, because they're not really taken into a comprehensive scope. So right now we're seeing that as a bit of a hindrance. So we do want to work with the ministry and work with the property owners and prospective developers to see if we can come up with more of a comprehensive corridor plan that would make hopefully this planning process a little bit quicker, and also maybe ensure more equitability amongst those developable properties, and come up with a process that would hopefully maybe alleviate some of the needs where certain developments may need to front end or trigger some of those upgrades, and other ones may not, or future developments may trigger new upgrades, which may be less efficient and effective overall or cost effective. So we do want to help play a stronger part in that process, and we're going to be advocating through the province locally and regionally and provincially really hard to see what we can do. So that's not something that's slowing things down or making things more difficult.
Okay. Mayor Bryce.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Yeah, I'm voting in favor of this resolution. A number of things, I guess. I've heard a number of comments, on density increases that aren't in the core of the city. And, I appreciate Councillor Statsky's comment, it's got to be remote from the city. Well, unfortunately, development isn't happening. It's not occurring at the rate that is close to matching the demand within the city. We've got developers that are out there that are undertaking these developments that are going to meet the needs. We have to remember as well, this parcel of land was brought into the city a number of years ago. So this is in the city of Cranbrook. And I think we got to be really careful here. We start picking and choosing where we're going to develop when we've got the developers are project ready out there to meet the needs in the community. We reject this. I'd be just caution you, what's the message that we're sending, to the current developers and to future developers. When this was brought in, everybody realized that this development was, those lands were going to develop to a certain scale. Now it's starting to occur, and I think these projects that are coming forward right now are the ones that are going to kickstart that whole area. And as Rob Bagan said earlier, we need development out there to pay for the cost of the services. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you. Councillor Blissett.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So I do agree with Councillor Stetsky. I'm always opposed to sprawl, and this is sprawl. However, the horse is long out of the barn on this, and we lost the fight back in 2008 when that council approved this development. There's been, almost, nearly 20 years of little movement on there. I do think this is first reading. I will support this to go ahead. But I don't want to see us develop all the way from Cranbrook out to Shadow Mountain. I want to preserve the countryside. I think the reason why a lot of us live here is because of the countryside. And if we can minimize our impact on it, that's living centrally in town. We saw this summer, BC Wildfire can't contain wildfires to protect every home in the regional district, like in the countryside. We really can't. We'll be fortunate to be able to protect the town if we had a bad wildfire season and a fire south of town. So I do think it's important to responsibly develop this area. They will do fire smarting. I know that. I've heard that, they will look after the wildlife concerns. I certainly wouldn't want to see a deer call out there in the future or an elk call. I would hope that the people who purchase properties out there realize they're living with wildlife, not in opposition to it, and they shouldn't expect an urban environment in that area. But I will support this at this point in time.
Okay, thank you. Rob, I didn't see any comments on here in regards to like the stress level of our fire emergency services. Is that something that might be on like our next report to council before we vote on this? Like at what point of density do we need to start looking at, maybe another, fire station?
So, I mean, ultimately, what I would do is I would defer to our fire chief on that. It's my understanding they're currently working through our plan, the citywide plan, which is being looked at with the lens from the planning perspective and the OCP work that we're doing. And so I've provided that information to the fire chief to pass on to the team that's doing that plan. And so that's something they are looking at. And certainly as part of this application process, we'll refer the zoning component as well as the OCP to the fire chief. I think it's indicated before, it is within our service area, and we know that fire service is a concern regardless at all times for the most part within the city. But yeah, I don't know the specifics about, densities and cutoffs and those types of things. I'll defer to the chief on that. But I do know that we are working on an overall service plan, essentially, I'm going to call it that. And then we are working in conjunction with them by providing sort of the planning information to the team. So they can take that into consideration.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
And then my second question here is, this is our second development that's moving into like high to medium density in this area. If this is approved, should we start looking at the whole Shadow Mountain master plan again and seeing if it needs to be relooked at what's zoned for where? Like, is there only so much capacity out there for units, or can we keep approving more high density developments out there?
So I think it's a bit of both. I think one of the limiting factors is the separation of the development lands from the original plan and the golf course.
Mhm.
And so what this is, from my perspective, in kind of a basic term, is sort of a retooling of the original vision of the development lands. Like I said, the original plan envisioned primarily large lot, single family homes at a much less density. We're still at a really, I'm using the terms medium density and low density from a units per hectare basis in terms of zoning. But when you actually look at the density of the east side lands, it's about 2.5 units, I think was the amendment, per hectare. That's essentially 2 homes for every 5 acres. So that's actually really low density from a true density perspective. So I think the retooling of the vision for this side of the lands is again, we have a new ownership. They're looking at their performers, their markets, and those types of things, and trying to utilize the existing development lands. Certainly, there could be opportunity for more retooling of the potential redevelopment lands on both the east side and west side. I think one of the things that we've thrown out here, I don't want to sound long-winded here, but with respect to the corridor plan even, is we kind of have, so we have Wildstone, we have Shadow Mountain, and the land in between. Well, when those 2 neighborhood plans were done, they were all under one base vision, one single owner. That's how it was done. In a perfect world, at some point, I would like to find an opportunity, or I guess I had to think about an opportunity, how we could work with those existing now new landowners to kind of revamp those neighborhood plans, because we're making changes to something that was developed, 13, 15 years ago. And so it's just like sort of little piecemeal changes. And we're trying to take that in the context of the corridor and all those things. And one of the things we talked about at the staff level that we could look at doing, in the near future, I mean, we're going to do the OCP first. We're almost there. I can tell you, I've got a draft on my desk, so we're getting close. But one of the things that I would envision doing is possibly more of a larger scale neighborhood, call it a neighborhood plan, that could potentially incorporate Wildstone and Shadow Mountain as their sub areas, and then the corridor lands in between. So now we're looking at it from a holistic picture. So we deal with the transportation issues, the types of future density. So maybe, we would find an opportunity to have meaningful discussion with the landowners to say, like, is the vision you're still working towards what you want, or what is it that you want to do? So we can take that into consideration. It would be a pretty monumental exercise. It's certainly something that we're going to look at doing, hopefully, as an option to bring forward to council for a potential future budget item, because it would take a lot of work, but it's something that I think might need doing, just because those developments and everything in between, like, they're all done in isolation from one another. And as we're seeing now with the different developments and impacts on highways and things, it's becoming a lot more complex. So the short answer is, yeah, it would be nice to review those original neighborhood plans and kind of retool them to, current visions, and then see how that all fits with infrastructure, transportation, et cetera.
All right. Okay, we're gonna have one last question from Councillor Stetsky.
It's more a statement. I'm happy to continue to remind people that the principle of smart growth matters when you're developing a community.
Okay, thank you. I'll call the question. All in favor? Opposed? Councillor Stetsky is opposed. All right, moving on to item 6.2. The next bylaw for consideration tonight is the false alarm bylaw number 4126, 2023. This bylaw is before council for first, second, and third reading tonight. Can I please have corporate services provide a brief overview of the report?
Good evening, Acting Mayor and Council. This false alarm bylaw is being rewritten and is before your consideration tonight after a review of the previous bylaw from 2008. The intent of the new bylaw is to make sure that we're invoicing businesses for false alarms as a result of faulty security equipment and repeat offenses triggered by the negligence of that alarm security equipment. With recent types of crime that's happened in the past, what's been happening is that the RCMP would be responding to multiple false alarm calls, and then the business would be getting invoiced by the RCMP for those false alarms. And then later on, because of the amount of false alarms that were happening, those systems would maybe be turned off or put down temporarily, and then the actual break-in would occur. And so we don't want to re-victimize businesses for what is not actually a false alarm, where there actually isn't be an attempt being made on the business. So the idea with this new language is to modernize, look at best practices and standards, further discern, allow RCMP and fire emergency services to further discern what those false alarms actually are, and then being able to have these clear definitions for an alarm system and false alarm, as well as modernizing the fee structure for multiple offenses with a 3-year grace period as well, if they have no offenses within that term. We were consulted with RCMP, with fire, with finance, and building a bylaw to bring together this draft for your consideration for 3 readings tonight.
Thank you, Bradley. Can I get a motion that council give first reading to false alarm bylaw number 4126, 2023? Councillor Blissett, seconded by Councillor Stetsky. Discussion. Councillor Stetsky.
So as I was reading the bylaw, I remember we heard from concerns from a number of businesses about being charged for alarms, whether they be false alarms or not. And when I was reading through the bylaw, I wondered if it wasn't an example of be careful what you wish for, because under this bylaw, might it not cost our businesses more than it currently does? No.
It depends on the upkeep of their equipment. And what really matters with the definition of the false alarm in this bylaw is that RCMP or fire and emergency services are going to be responding on site, and that's what constitutes the false alarm. So if RCMP or fire are on site and they deem at that time that it does not meet the requirements under the definition of the bylaw to actually be a false alarm, those businesses won't be invoiced. Yeah, and previously it would default to being known as a false alarm, and then the RCMP would invoice those properties. In the development of this bylaw as well, there was just conversations with RCMP to determine what actually constitutes these false alarms and not. So the RCMP isn't just invoicing properties without doing a further due diligence when they're at the scene.
Okay, thank you. Bradley, sorry, I had a question here. So I appreciate the intent of this bylaw with not wanting to re-victimize businesses, but then I see that we're also increasing the amount of fine for first, second, and third, or maybe it's just the second and third offense. Just wondering for the reasoning of increasing the amount of fine.
Yeah, just looking at best practices in BC, that's usually the scale that people had as $100 increments rather than $50 increments. And considering the bylaw was written in 2008, that's what Vernon and Penticton and other similar municipalities have as their fee structures.
Okay, thank you. Any further questions? All right, all in favor? Carried. All right, now can I get a motion that council gives second reading to false alarm bylaw number 4126, 2023? Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Graham. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. And can I get a motion that council give third reading to false alarm bylaw number 4126, 2023? Moved by Councillor Graham, seconded by Councillor Blissett. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. Moving on to new business. The first item is from CAO's office regarding budget 2024 direction to administration. Can I ask CAO Furcho to provide a brief overview of the report?
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Peabody, I guess maybe what I'll just ask is this might not be brief. I'm typically quite brief, but I think in this case, a few more words today might save us a lot of work at the last parts of budget season. So the purpose of this report is really to seek council direction as we spend the next 3 months building our budgets and business plans for council. And I just have some things to talk about here tonight that are different than in previous years. So we're going to ask 2 questions at the end of this meeting. One is that council provide the top 3 strategic priorities for 2024 for administration to develop the budget and business plans. And we do have your strat plan. There's some things that have changed and some other pressures that might be on council. And we will try to achieve all the things in the strat plan, but really what we'd be looking for is what are the top 3 priorities as we go through. And I'll talk a bit more about why that is. And secondly, if council supports staff developing a budget that could exceed the 5-year projections, or if you provide a maximum tax increase that council could support in 2024. And I'll talk a bit more about that as well. And tonight might be just opening the door to that discussion, and then council could have more discussions with staff prior to making these decisions. So these could be tabled tonight. And I know there's meetings coming up that we'll discuss in a little more depth. And then maybe we could revisit this on the 25th of September. But I just wanted to go through some material. I did have some things in the report, but some things I did not put in the report I was just going to speak to. So as always, our goal will be to allocate the resources and work as effectively and efficiently as possible to maintain the services and maintain the projected budget level increases over the next 5 years for the tax increases that we have provided to council. And so you have those numbers in front of you in the report from 2023 up to 2027. And we will, and we, as we always do, we reallocate resources within the corporation to meet those overall targets as we can find savings in one area and bigger expenses in others, and without really changing the services or increase or adding or subtracting services. But the last few years, things have been a little bit different than they were in the past. And I think this is the year where we did a lot of that internal shuffling last year. And I think this is the year where it's going to come forward. And it's going to be important that we have this conversation before we get to near the end of the budget process, rather than at the end of the budget process. So I just want to talk about what's different. Why am I bringing this up this year? What has changed? So what you're seeing is, if you look in the media, a lot of communities now, they're presenting budget predictions of 7 to 9% or more in a lot of the major centers and for the foreseeable future, just because they haven't found a solution. And what are some examples of things that aren't normal? Well, I think if we had a big snow year, council and taxpayers would understand the snow budget's higher. But some of these things you don't see, and regular residents don't see some of these things. So the first item I'll just go through, like labor and contract availability. Like contractors are busy now when in the past they might not have been. And it's difficult hiring staff. So somebody that runs a business in Cranbrook knows if they're trying to build stuff or do things with contractors, it's difficult to get the contractors. And they also know that hiring staff is difficult. You see please help signs everywhere. It's the same for the city. So I'll use an example in Public Works where we typically had student labor assisting in the summer programs. We weren't able to attract student labor. They have better options out there now, where Cranbrook used to be a pretty great place to work in the summer for students. These days, things are different. And so what that meant was we had a gap that we had to fill in order to get the work done. But now we're hiring regular paid employees at regular rates. So that meant a decrease in 4,480 hours of work in the field through this summer. So you will see that less level of maintenance in the boulevards, in the garbage around town, the grass mowing. And so with that lower level of staff availability to do the work, that causes visible gaps in our delivery of that service. So we can either increase the funding or accept a lower level of service. Will be some of the kinds of choices we'll talk about this fall. And then the difficulty in hiring contractors, if I use a real world example, is as we drove down Victoria today, you see the retaining wall, and the retaining wall is starting to fall apart. And so you'd say, well, we just hire a contractor to fix it. Well, number one, there's no contractors available. And if you do get one, the prices are 20 to 40% higher than they would be in normal years. Let me just use that term. So we can't get contractors. So you'd say, well, we should just do it in-house because it'd be cheaper, right? But remember the conversation about the staff. We already don't have enough staff to do the work everybody expects to be done. So how do we add more work to those staff? So that's just a labor and contractor availability example I wanted to share. I'll go to labor costs now. So we all are aware of the rising contract costs, for example, with the RCMP contract. We had the back pay issue, but the contract that we have with the RCMP, the escalating costs over time are built into the 5 years that you see now. And that is a big driver of the percent increases you're going to see over the next few years. What didn't we see? Well, since the May budget prediction, there's $108,000 has been added to the cost of the labor contract that we weren't aware of. That just came out of the blue. As you know, body-worn cameras, Cranbrook's one of the target communities for body-worn cameras, and that is 100% paid for by the municipality. All municipalities have been asking the federal government for some support on that. So far, there hasn't been any. So that cost is baked in, but here's where things are a little different that I need to talk about, is in our file management over at the RCMP right now, we are thin on the record management side. We have been for some time. And so we have one individual that handles 675 of the legal files per month. And once you add body-worn cameras in, we're already not meeting the RCMP requirements, but when you add body-worn cameras, each camera each day is generating electronic files that need to be dealt with. And so we're going to have that additional load on IT services that we haven't quite understood the exact impact of, and record management. So I just want to talk about that as a, gee, you know, that's new. And it's not baked into the predictions. So some of the other things that are coming, WCB, you've heard us talk about that. And I just want to mention that has escalated considerably. So the base rate that all municipalities pay plus our experience rating. So we went from 2021 at 339,000, has escalated to 600 to 863,000 to where we're looking at close to $1 million, $992,000 this year. So that's why we have Craig Kopar, our safety person that is working on changing that curve on our experience rating, but the base rate and just the cost of WCB are going up everywhere. And so we're getting some success, but as you remember, that's 3 years average for the past 3 years affect the current 3 years. So that's how that rolls. So it does take a little time to move that curve. And we are starting to see the bend forward. Like we're making some progress, but that cost is a significant new cost. So staff turnover, when, you know, the good old days, someone would join the city of Prince George at 18 or 20 years old, stay for 35 years. That's not how businesses work anymore. Same with the city, same with businesses. So we are seeing a lot more staff turnover, people joining and leaving the organization, people changing jobs within the organization. So I asked HR to pull some stats. And when you have people leave and we got to rehire, there's gaps. When people move from one job to another, and then we have like that domino effect within the organization, there's gaps. That gap just in public works is equivalent to 4,000 person hours or 2 full FTEs over the course of the year. So in HR in general, for the city of Cranbrook, we've been really steady since 2014. I got the statistics pulled. We're generally running around 60 staff movements a year up until 3 years ago. Boom, it goes up to 95, 100, 106, and we're in what, September now? We're just a little over halfway through the year. We're over 60 movements at over halfway through the year. That's what in a normal year, that'd be what you'd get all year. So that just tells you a little bit about that side. So I'll go now to inflation and supply issues. So this is where not just a business owner, but every person in Cranbrook as a resident has experienced when you go grocery shopping, what used to fill your grocery cart. Now, when you go to the till and your grocery cart's full, you get a bit of a surprise unless you've been managing your budget and you go there with half the cart you used to go. You understand those inflationary rates, and that impacts the local government as well. So an example is a hydrovac truck. So that's what we use to clean sewers and storm pipes. The cost of that in 2019 was 450,000. Today, 3 years later, is 900,000. Same vehicle. And when you order one, you're lucky to get it, within a year or two versus getting it within that same year. We talk about when we do the road, water, sewer, complete replacement of a road, instead of just paving it, we do the whole thing, a city block. The cost of that used to be 550,000 per city block was the stat you could use in 2019-ish. Today, it's 1.1, like $1,150,000 per city block for that same work. And we talk about things like the project pricing. So we have to get project estimates that we bring to council for budgeting, and then it's the next year before we can actually implement the project. Well, nowadays those project price estimates that used to be good for a year or two are out of date almost as soon as they're written. We used to have 10 to 15% contingency costs in budgets that we've now bumped up to around 40%, and they're still sometimes out. Using the example, the sewer lagoon project that you saw today, the price in some of those large components went up by 300% from the time that project started to today. So those costs are surprises. Fleet and property insurance, so our insurance for the city, our stuff. It went up from 2019, 490,000. It's over 642,000 this year. It's jumped, over 50,000 this year. That was not something we saw coming. So, and then, new challenges. So services that we think should be in provincial jurisdiction, like we deal with the homeless encampments, the social services, addictions, homeless services, within the jurisdiction of the federal or provincial government, I should say, as the city, there's a lot of pressure to do stuff in the city. Let's make sure that we're on top of that portfolio, when we have been doing that. And council approved the camping bylaw that we've been acting on, and you've been hearing some updates that we've been giving in the media, and we're going to do more. But that work does have an expense, and that expense, because it is not being borne by the province, is being dealt with by the local taxpayer. And we're going to have a talk this fall about that service. So at present, we spend over 62,000 on the cleanup. It's about $3,200 a week that we are spending on that camp cleanup with security. So that service, where we used to provide bylaw, which is barking dogs and parking and overheight fences, and we've got a bylaw officer now that spends 30 hours a week on homeless encampments. So those are files that are piling up on the regular bylaw side because we're providing somewhat of a new service. So that's, I'll talk a bit more about that new service side here. And so when we come back to council, once staff, we do adjust within, and that's why I'm saying some of this, then if I know what your top 3 priorities are, and I know what your maximum % tax increase is, as staff, rather than trying to do something at the very end of the budget process, through these next 3 months, we can formulate a budget that more or less ensures that your 3 priorities, or most of your strategic priorities, but if we know what the top 3 can be addressed, and we know what's a lower priority, we can suggest where we can reduce the service, like we talked about, with the lower level of support that we have with hours of work for parks. Is that something council supports, or do we want to add money, which is a tax increase or a lower level of service? So that'll be a discussion with council. If we're going to increase the service or add a service, like we're talking about dealing with homeless encampments, is that a service council wants to provide? So either we're going to pay for that through new tax money, or we're going to reduce something somewhere else. So that's where we get into council's realm of decision making. So with this information I'm asking for, administration is going to be much better position to have a good budget and business plan put together for good, robust discussion with council rather than having to do a whole bunch of adjustments at the end very quickly without a lot of good research and work behind it. So I'm just, sorry, I'm just gonna have a drink of water quick. So the two questions really are, what are council's top 3 priorities for 2024? And you know, the resources within staff are finite, and as you know, and our ability to move stuff around within and between departments, I think we're going to bump up against the edge of that this year. So today's probably not going to be the day to get an answer, but I just wanted to put this on the table and get you thinking about it. And then hopefully within the next few council meetings, we can get that so that we can really get to work as staff on a good business plan and budget for you. And then also where we know that ceiling is, you know what our projected 5 years increases are. I can tell you likely we're going to be exceeding that unless we can get a lot of new market increases that I'm not aware of coming in or changes. But what is that maximum ceiling? And then once we know that, once we know where we are capped out, so to speak, if we can't keep under that, what are some of those difficult decisions that need to be made? And if we know what your top 3 strategic priorities are, we can recommend what services to reduce, what services to cut, and help you meet what you want to do as your objectives. So for today, sorry, I took a little longer speaking, but I just feel there is so much work that goes on behind the scenes over the next few months doing this work. Council direction in the early stages will be really helpful to administration to get the best value from staff time over the next few months building that. So thank you.
Okay, thank you, CAO Furcho. I'll call the, or I'll put the motion on the table here. Can I get a motion that council provide council's top 3 strategic priorities for 2024 for administration to develop the 2024 budget and business plans? Moved by Councillor Stetsky, seconded by Councillor Popoff. Before we start the discussion, what I'm thinking, if you're agreeable to this, is we can go around the table and we can sort of go councillor by councillor and sort of express what our top 3 concerns are, and then maybe what you think the tax rate is, and then maybe see if there's some similar themes there going forward, or should we just put this as something that we should discuss about at a later date? Councillor Stetsky?
A couple of things. Yeah, I'd like to give it some thought between now and the next council meeting and maybe present the 3 then, unless everybody else has their 3 ready to go. And CEO Furcho, looking ahead to this year, how much additional revenue does the city get for a 1% increase in taxes, just so people understand the scale?
It's in, I don't know the exact number. It's a little around 300,000, just say.
Okay, so for every 300,000 of new money we need, it's a 1% increase in taxes.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Stetsky. Anyone else? Councillor Graham?
Yeah, I would be in favor of pushing this back to a different council meeting so we can have time to think about what priorities are percolating to the top.
Okay, perfect. Councillor Popoff?
Yeah, yes, thank you, Mayor. I'd agree that unless there's a burning issue for it right now, Mark, some greater consideration at this point. And also when we do come back, if that's what we do, I'd like to understand, as you were just going down your list, there's certain fixed, non-negotiable things. If we want to progress in areas, this is what the cost is, or this is what it's just going to cost regardless. So I'd like to kind of learn what are those that are outside of our control, like insurance, for example, what are within our control, and what's the quality variable if we stay with it or don't do it. And then the third part is, if it's going to be what's the quality? in making some of these decisions. If it's a lesser service, what's the real quality shift? Should we go to a lesser service or a lesser amount for something? Just to get some context from it, because you're the experts that are bringing this information to us, and we need some sort of metrics to understand as we balance the cost versus the quality pieces. So that would be valuable for me.
CEO Furcho.
So acting mayor through to Councillor Popoff, the only thing I'd just use as a caveat to that is things like the WCB, the liability insurance, the RCMP contract, some of those things are the fixed costs. Some of the other questions on like what's a lower level of service look like, some of that discussion will be around it depends, like, what councils, like you went through this summer with that lower level of service with parks. Did anybody notice, or was that a big source of complaints? Like, so there's going to be things that are a little less definable that way, that when I talk about changing a service or like reducing a level of service, it's not, it's qualitative more than quantitative. In some cases, I can tell you the hours, but do people notice? The same like snow plowing, when we have, back-to-back snow events, we might be spending all the money and having every piece of equipment on it, but the level of service taxpayers are seeing is not great because we just have back-to-back snow events. So it's I guess that one will be a little tougher. I think that would be a great conversation once we get later in the process and we're talking about actually affecting a service with a dollar value. Then I can get that assessment done to say, this level of service will give you this level of service get you that. But for me to do it broadly across the whole thing before, I think it might be a little early for just that one.
Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I certainly look forward to this coming back to council for some additional reflection. Just in terms of initial thoughts, I guess, I think of that analogy of having a container and you put in the big rocks first and you say it's full, but then you still have room for some small and medium-sized rocks. And then you say it's full. Well, then you put in some sand and then you say it's full, and then you pour in some water and then you say, okay, maybe now it's really full. But we have to prioritize because we have finite resources. So in terms of those big rocks that we really, really need, for me, critical infrastructure and asset management comes to mind. So today we've spent a good chunk of time looking at our infrastructure related to our drinking water. We need drinking water to have folks living here, to have businesses running. I mean, that's a non-negotiable. So for me, that's an example of critical infrastructure. What can we do now that is going to benefit our community now, but also far into the future? So for me, something like that is an example of a big rock that we need. And I'm sure our staff would have additional thoughts around those types of things around critical. So for me, that's one, critical infrastructure and asset management. And I would also include social issues / housing. Housing is related to critical infrastructure, that we need to have some of that infrastructure in place in order to do more housing down the road. So I just wanted to share those couple of initial thoughts, and I certainly look forward to additional conversation. And there are hard decisions because those other, the small rocks and the sand and the water, those are great things, but what is really essential to our community?
Councillor Furcho.
Yeah, and I thank you for that. And I guess I don't want to be too alarmist here. It's just like we will put together a budget that will handle all of the core services that we typically provide. No question about that. It's just that as we get bumping up against the edges of what council may be willing to increase taxes, or as we start to have to make those decisions, value judgments, we won't, as staff, we'll obviously not go there first, but when it comes to more of the periphery stuff, I think that's where we'll be looking at, how big of a deal does council feel creating the new service we have around encampments is, the loss of the maintenance in the parks, how critical is that? So I think maybe not down to the big rock cores, but kind of one step past that, because we're not dealing, like, our whole budget process in our budget is still intact. All I'm saying is that in the last few years, we've just had some things that were just unpredictable happening, and it's making budgeting in a normal way very difficult. And a little extra direction now will give us a much better process over the next 3 months than it will if I just do it in a vacuum and think I got something great, and then in 3 months you guys are surprised at what I bring forward. So
Councillor Blissett.
Thank you. So I agree with Councillor Ray. We certainly have to look after our infrastructure first. So that's the priority. I do think those are in our must-have category. And then we have to look at, sorry, those, as you say, those periphery things. And this may not be a year to fund those periphery, items. We did have a substantial increase last year at 5.8+%. That's the highest since I've been here. I'm sorry. Maybe somebody else should speak right now.
I get emotional too when we talk about tax increases. This is a tough topic. So sorry, Councillor Popoff.
Thank you. And, I think of core functions, and I also think of our ongoing growth and prosperity, which means we have to keep our not just our asset management, maintenance but also the upsizing and development of our infrastructure so we can fulfill some of the things we've just been planning on. We just had our downtown revitalization plan. We're going through our OCP. We're going to be talking about proper smart growth placements in our communities. And all of that is hinged on the basis of where are the pipes. What do we need to do to upgrade those? Do we delay it another 5 years as prices may come down? Or do we do some legacy infrastructure work and start planning and looking at the funding and support for those legacy pieces of infrastructure so we can fulfill our downtown revitalization, housing densification, for example? So do we delay that? Or do we charge forward with that as part of our council of action, right, Mayor Price, and start working forward on that? So we need to think about those as well. And of course, what are the costs? But delaying also delays growth and prosperity. And I don't want to see some of these plans just sitting and getting dust on the shelves.
Councillor Blissett.
Yeah, thank you. So I don't want things delayed either, but I do think we've always been able to pare the budget down from the original cost estimate. We have often started off at, well, at this time it says 5.87%. And we've been able to go, no, I don't think on this, or we can make adjustments and lower that. So I would like to see it less than 5%, certainly. And, I recall not last year's budget, but before that, in the previous term, when we increased a number of positions, and our CFO went through how we were going to fund that with the market increase in that. Now, I understand, prices have gone up since then on projects, but then we might need to look at some of those projects and what we're going to do. So I'm very concerned about the cost of living for the residents of Cranbrook, and we are a big part of that. We've increased the water and sewer rates. We've increased our taxes over the last year. And so now we're going to compound that again this year. So I do think we have to be, going through this with a very sharp pencil and looking at what we can trim down. So I would hope that when staff are coming to us, they're not coming to us with a wish list. They're coming to us with a must-do list. And then we can make decisions around that.
Thank you, Norma. I agree with the fellow councillors here that infrastructure renewal and maintenance is quite important, as it always is. Community safety and well-being and housing security and development are two other things on my list. I would love to see our tax rate below 5% if possible as well. But what we want and what's possible could be two different things. Okay, thank you. A good question I had for CAO Furcho is, if this motion is approved, when do you see council having this discussion as far as what our top 3 priorities are And how do you see us bringing this back to staff? Can this be done at a committee of the whole or at a regular meeting?
The actual decision, because it'll have a pretty big impact on the budget process, I'd prefer be at a regular meeting. We can have conversations at committee of the whole, and there will be some meetings with staff where there'll be an opportunity to discuss, a little more of the some of the issues that I've raised. But I'm just really looking for that high level direction, and maybe just to come back to what Councillor Bissett said, with clarity around what our council's priorities. Like, I can guarantee you, we won't be supporting any kind of wish list items. It's must to do items. And where we're struggling is to deliver the services that we have delivered, because we're bumping against the labor shortages or the price increases to do what used to be done for a little more easily. And so with those top priorities, if it becomes more difficult decisions to make around the corporation, that clarity from council, what direction you want to go, helps us prepare and present more information for council to make those decisions, rather than kind of, I don't know, working on the edges at the very last minute. I guess we can work a little more deeply throughout the corporation with that good high level direction.
Okay, Mayor Price.
No, thank you, Mayor. Yeah, good conversation. Yeah, I agree with pretty well everything the other councillors have spoken to today. No questions, just not us. I think most municipalities right now are just, we're in a period of where budgetary decisions are going to be based on critical spending approvals. I guess too, what Mark is looking for, we do the top-down approach or the bottom-up approach. Councillor Bissett mentioned, cost of living to the residents, 5.6 or 5.8%. Frankly, I really don't believe we can come in at 5.6% without having a serious impact on our services. We have water, sewer, garbage, and public safety that we have no choice in. So those are going to go on the table first, I would assume. So anything related to that's quite critical in those areas are going to be addressed right off the bat. We already know we've got some significant budgetary items that are going to be coming forward related to every one of those categories. So we're going to be, I wouldn't be surprised, if you don't want to be around 8 or 9%. I honestly believe we'll be looking at eliminating services this year. So we can either do the top-down approach, and we can talk about this on the 25th. What's your bottom line on the percentage increase? If we want to do the bottom-up, we let staff hack and slash as the best they can. They bring it to us. And if it's not acceptable, then it's going to be our responsibility to eliminate the projects that we don't want to see there. So yeah, and if we want it the other way, you put your maximum allowable percentage in. But I can tell you right now, there's a number of municipalities already talking that they're talking that it could be an 8, 9, 10% tax increase for multiple years going forward until some of this stuff is corrected. So it's a big job. So yeah, we wouldn't want to have to make list my 3 priorities, and I'd rather wait till the next meeting and give this quite a bit more thought and to see if there's any other solutions out there. Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to call the question. All in favor? Oh, sorry. The motion is, can I get a motion that council provide council's top 3 strategic priorities to 2024 for administration to develop the 2024 budget and business plans?
I want to put a motion that we forward this or table this till the 25th.
Yeah. I think the motion is that we're going to go through the act of doing it, but not actually have a decision tonight. This is the way I read this.
Yeah, I don't read it like that.
No?
Personally. So I would put a motion forward that we table, which supersedes the motion on the floor right now, if I have enough votes to table this to the 25th council meeting.
Okay.
I'd be in favor of tabling this as well.
Okay. Seconded by Mayor Price. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. All right. Moving on to item 2 here. Can I get a motion that council supports staff developing a budget that could exceed the 5-year projections or provide the maximum tax increase that council would support in 2024?
I would also table that to the 25th.
Is there a seconder? Seconded by Councillor Popoff. All in favor? Carried. There's also a potential motion here, which might be what I just read. That's the same one. Thank you. Perfect. Yes, Councillor Blissett, or Ray.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. When these motions come back, I wonder if maybe we could, maybe for the second motion, if maybe we want to look at the wording of that. I'm not sure if that motion means we endorse both of those or that we are in fact choosing one or the other, like top down versus bottom up. So just a suggestion to give some thoughts on kind of what exactly we're looking for there.
Okay, duly noted. Thank you. Okay, moving on to item 8.2. The next item is from Finance regarding voting delegates for the Municipal Insurance Association of BC. Can I ask Finance to provide a brief overview of the report?
Good evening, Mayor and Council. Can you hear me?
Yep.
Good. I just lost the report. So this report is it's an annual report where we are appointing, and I just need to pull up that report again. Sorry. I just had it and I just lost it. Okay. So this is to appoint 1 member of council and 2 alternative members of council as Municipal Insurance Association of BC voting delegates. So this is annual, each year during the MIBC's annual general meeting, 1 voting delegate who is a member of council will be entitled to the vote on behalf of the interests of their local government. And we are required to advise MIBC annually before the AGM who will act as a voting delegate and alternatives on behalf of the city of Cranbrook. The 2023 AGM will be held on September the 19th in conjunction with the UBCM annual convention in Vancouver. And the following councillors are attending the UBCM convention: Wes Graham, Wayne Stetsky, Ron Popoff, and Norma Blissett. And currently, Councillor Graham is the voting delegate, and Councillor Popoff is the only alternate, I should say.
Okay, thank you, Charlene. I'll throw this. I guess we need someone to volunteer to be the second alternate before throwing this motion on the table. Do we have any volunteers from Councillor Blissett? Okay, thank you. And Councillor Graham and Councillor Popoff, are you still agreeing to? Yeah.
We've had this appointment for 8 years.
Okay, perfect. Can I get a motion? The council appoint Councillor Graham as the voting delegate for MIABC, and further that council appoint Councillor Popoff and Councillor Blissett as the 2 alternating voting delegates for MIABC. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Stetsky. All in favor? Carried. Thank you. Item 8.3. Next on the item is also from Finance regarding the financial audit services. Can I ask Finance to provide a brief overview of the report?
Yes, this report is to appoint BDO, Canada LLP, as the city's independent external auditor for the fiscal years 2023-2027. BDO has been our auditor since 1980s. We brought it out to RFP in July, and we only received one proposal, which was BDO. BDO also provides services to Cranbrook Public Library, and that is billed directly to the library. BDO has had long-standing positive relationships with the City of Cranbrook. They are familiar with the city's historical information, control systems, and procedures. During the audit process, the BDO Canada staff have always conducted themselves in a professional manner in discussions with the city staff. The audit team has demonstrated sound knowledge of and experience in public sector accounting and auditing, and BDO Canada staff make themselves available for ongoing communication and assistance throughout the year. So for the 2023 proposal, they're proposing $41,250, which is the same amount that they charged us for 2022 audit. And then they have included a 4% increase for 2024 to 2027.
Okay, thank you, Charlene. Can I get a motion that council appoint BDO Canada LLP as the city's independent internal auditor under section 169 of the community charter for the fiscal years 2023 to 2027, and that the chief administration officer and director of finance be authorized to sign the engagement letter? Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Blissett. Discussion? Councillor Graham.
Yeah, just one question. Nothing really to do with BDO, but because they're the auditor and they work specifically, come in and talk to council about the audit report. Just curious why the mayor isn't signing and CAO versus the CAO and CFO.
I believe that it's their part of the audit requirement is that they discuss with the audit committee, which is the mayor and council, the audit report, the findings, and the planning. But traditionally, the audits have always been signed by the CFO, in the engagement. And I would have to actually discuss that with BDO if you would like to know why that is traditionally.
Yeah, I'm not stopping it's just strange to me that just the way that it's presented to us when they do the audit findings and everybody's out and it's just us with the auditor, that we're not signing on the agreement. Well, that's the mayor not signing the agreement and CAO. But anyway, I'll ask that question in the audit.
Yes, that's a good question to ask them.
There we go. Any other further discussion? Okay, call the question. All in favor? Carried.
Thank you.
Thank you. All right, moving on to item 8.4. The next item is from Engineering and Development Services regarding critical infrastructure funding for the Gold Creek Dam. Can I ask Engineering and Development Services to provide a brief overview of the report?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Peabody. So this report is a bit of a summary of the more recent background on the city's Gold Creek Dam. As per the report, the Gold Creek Dam is a critical piece of infrastructure to supply drinking water supply for the city of Cranbrook, in addition to the water that would be required for any fire flow capabilities. This is especially critical in the summer months where we are more likely to experience drought and where the other water sources are under more pressure or the city does not have the prevailing water rights to take drinking water during that time. The report does go on to have some of the background of the more recent work over the last several years where there has been some failure mechanisms at the dam and some interim emergency repairs completed while the city looks for longer term solutions to replace this critical piece of infrastructure. The purpose of this report is to really engage with council and to obtain council support to work with applicable regulatory bodies and funding agencies and senior levels of government to request financial support for the replacement of this critical piece of infrastructure. Council did go on a tour earlier today to look at some of these critical infrastructure components. And as we've seen most recently, climate change and these drought cycles, in addition to some of the wildfire concerns that would affect other sources of water, other watersheds, have really exacerbated the need for this to be taken care of. And those climate change impacts have really made the replacement of this dam have to be something that's much larger than it was originally intended to do, and makes it something that is very difficult for the city to undertake, as it is not simply the replacement of an existing piece of infrastructure.
Thank you, Mike. Can I get a motion that council work with administration to engage with applicable regulatory bodies, funding agencies, and senior levels of government to request financial support for the replacement of the failing Gold Creek Dam as a primary drinking water source for the city of Cranbrook? Moved by Councillor Stetsky, seconded by Councillor Blissett. Discussion. All in favor? Carried. All right, item 8.5. The next item is also from Engineering and Development Services regarding the Southwood Heights Phase 1 subdivision and the 17th Street South Development Cost Charge DCC project for oversizing. Can I ask Engineering and Development Services to provide a brief overview of the report?
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. The developers brought forward a plan to undertake a subdivision up, they're calling it Southwood Heights. This is their first phase. It's approximately 18 lots. However, it's at the corner of 4th Avenue South and 17th Street South, both collector roads in the city. Coming forward to council tonight to ask for funds from the Roads Development Cost Charge Reserve, our annual road subdivision upgrades allotment, and from the roads program to help fund oversizing of 4th Avenue to keep it the same width, to undertake the DCC project on 17th. So that's widening the rest of the road and the curb. And then because of the number of patches for the services they want to put in the utility crossings, and given the state of the road with some failing areas, staff are proposing to pay to patch the areas. Instead of having a number of patches up there, work with the developer to pave the whole road. So this collector road is one lift. It's in better shape. So when it does get built through to 8th to 14th over the next so many years, it's not a third patches essentially this new road.
Okay, thank you. Okay, can I get a motion? Sorry. Make sure I get the right one here. Can I get a motion that council authorize the use of $112,631.67 from the Roads Development Cost Charge Reserve, $20,000 from the roads subdivisions upgrades annual allotment, and $282,597.56 from the 2023 Capital Roads Program to fund the roads oversizing and 17th Street South DCC project for Southwood Heights Phase 1 subdivision. Moved by Councillor Blissett, seconded by Councillor Ray. Discussion. Councillor Stetsky.
So a quick question, because the alternative, I should bring out a calculator, but it seems to have the same cost, but yet we're requiring potentially Southwood Heights Development Corporation to do the construction and funding.
Thank you, Councillor Stetsky, through the acting mayor. The alternative that I've given, the other alternative is that we just don't move forward, but the alternative provided is that Southwood Heights pays for the development cost charge portion of the project, and then what we, in accordance with the Local Government Act, we issue DCC credits, as it's called. So as this developer develops elsewhere, we wouldn't charge them those DCCs until they made up for that payment. So it's an accounting practice that we haven't done before at the city, but it's something we could do if council wishes.
Councillor Graham.
Well, now that that's brought up, what does the developer stated? Would they want credits or would they just want this?
Councillor Graham, through the acting mayor, haven't got into detail with that with the developer because the developer for this development is specifically the Southwood Heights Development Corporation. I'm fairly sure they wouldn't want the credits because this is the only development they're technically doing. So, but council still could require them to go through the credit process and then it may make that corporation do more development somewhere else, but that's up to council.
Okay. I had one question here as well. This funding here, like we just heard CAO Furcho talking about how, we look at projects and then all of a sudden the cost of it is 200, 300% more. Will this be the final amount of funding? Do you foresee requested for this project or do you see more coming down the line?
Acting Mayor Peabody, at this point, I would hope that it's the final cost because they've hired their contractor they're working with. The cost of the cost from that contractor was provided to WSP and they've dated their stamped report of August 31st. I mean, there is always a chance they'll try and bill us more, but that rarely happens once they get a cost from the contractor, unless there's something unexpected found.
Okay, any further questions from council? Okay, I'll call the question. All in favor? Carried. All right, moving on to item 8.6. The next item is also from Engineering and Development Services regarding a speed reduction request for Highway 95A. Can I ask Engineering and Development Services to provide a brief overview of the report?
Thank you again, Acting Mayor, Council. Bringing this request forward for for Council's endorsement of asking the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure, MOTI, for a speed reduction within city limits. So that's McPhee Bridge all the way into town. It ties in with the conversation earlier with the number of development proposals we're getting along that corridor to really start the planning process with highways or MOTI that we're talking about. At this point, at least a couple of developments show that they're going to need to put some type of intersection upgrade, whether it be signalization or the Ministry of Transportation's and Infrastructure's roundabout first policy. So it could be a roundabout. I don't know those answers yet, but given that we're looking at intersection upgrades, from my perspective as city engineer, we should be looking at a speed reduction to accommodate this additional traffic and slowing down traffic if we were going to start signalizing intersections on that corridor.
Okay, thank you, Derek. Can I get a motion that council requests the Ministry of Transportation and Infrastructure consider a speed reduction on Highway 95A with the City of Cranbrook boundary? Moved by Councillor Stetsky, seconded by Councillor Blissett. Discussion? Councillor Graham?
Thank you. And that's a great idea with that speed reduction. What I was curious about is just the reality of it going all the way to McPhee Bridge with that passing lane there. I'm wondering if we're better off just to identify to the Wycliffe turn. I just worry that we might be asking for too much and they're going to say no versus the immediate area up to Wycliffe, because really after that there's not any access. That's just what I worry about with that passing lane and that hill, that they might just come back and say no. At least if it's to Wycliffe, we have a bit of a leg to stand on with arguments as future development happens. So that's just one question on whether we want to identify city boundary or the Wycliffe turn. Just throwing it out there for thoughts.
Councillor Graham, throughout the acting mayor, there is some great thought to that. We could definitely bring that up with the MOTI to see what their thoughts are. Council could go with this resolution, amend it, or we could leave it open and just see how the discussions go and bring it back if we need to.
Okay, Councillor Popoff.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. So what I understand then, Curtis, is this is a negotiation process you're going to be going through with Modi. It's not a fixed this or nothing.
Councillor Popoff, that's my understanding. They've asked for us to obtain support from City Council and the RCMP before they'll look at it. So that's why we're bringing it forward to yourselves.
Yeah, and yeah, I'm fine with the resolution as reads, but if there is a bit of hesitation, maybe then you just throw suggestions as like up to the boundary. It doesn't necessarily mean right to the boundary. So I think that's fine with that. Yeah.
Okay. Great. Any further discussion? Okay. Call the question. All in favor? Carried. Okay, moving on to item 8.7. The next item is from Corporate Services regarding a request to the Ministry of Housing and Urgent Senior Housing in Cranbrook. Can I ask Corporate Services to provide a brief overview of the report?
So we have Marcel's away, so you get me again. So I'll just go back to when council supported hiring or the position, the social development coordinator position, and the support we got from the regional district and council for that position was all about getting out in the community, learning about some of the issues around homelessness, and then bringing that information back to council and back to a political level so that advocacy could occur. So it wasn't about solving the issues with the taxpayer money from the city of Cranbrook, but really identifying what the problems are and then advocating back to what the solutions might be. So Marcel has done a great job of looking at how the delivery of provincial and nonprofit groups are doing out there in the field in Cranbrook. And one of the first observations she made was that in the travel lodge, acting as the homeless shelter, that 40% of the residents that are taking advantage of that program are not people that you would see as what people think of your traditional homeless encampment folks that are now in the temporary homeless shelter. It was a senior population that was simply priced out of the senior rental market in Cranbrook. So it's not folks that have mental health issues or addictions issues. It's seniors with low income that have nowhere else to go, and they are ending up in the travel lodge. So that's 40% of the population. As she noted in the report, 3 individuals do need a little support. But then more alarmingly is, a report of the 85-year-old and 75-year-old female resident that is now also ending up not able to access the travel lodge, but moving into the tent camps on Ridgeview. So the low-income senior housing situation in Cranbrook is pretty desperate once you start to see statistics like that. So she wanted to raise that. And then there was the town hall meeting that the chamber hosted, and MLA Tom Shapika also raised it at the meeting. So we were hoping to enlist his support along with the Minister of Housing to raise this issue in Cranbrook. I think residents, should be concerned when that's what's happening here. And because the space is simply run out, we definitely need ministry attention on this issue. And secondly, when dealing with folks in the homeless camps, what we've learned over the last couple of years, both in heat events and winter cold events, is some residents of the tent camps do not want to move into more permanent housing. They are happy in the tent camps and they will not leave them even when it's -30 or super hot. And those residents aren't who we're talking about, but there are a number of residents in the tent camps that are ready to move into more permanent housing opportunities. And so the first step in that process is a temporary shelter. It's a space with rules, it's under a roof. And right now, for folks that are in tents that would like to move into a temporary shelter within a building, cannot do that. And the spaces are all full. And like I say, if 40% of the residents are seniors and we can have those seniors placed into more appropriate housing, that's what seniors with low income should be in Cranbrook, that opens a lot of spaces for those folks in the tents to get out of the tents, quit being the visible homeless that you see in Cranbrook, move into the shelter. And we're starting to move that continuum. So we just wanted to raise this issue. So what council has in front of you there was we did a little tweak with following proper protocol. So it is addressed to the Minister of Housing. We've copied MLA Shapika on it. And so that's what you have in front of you tonight.
Okay. Thank you, Mark. Can I get a motion that council approve release of the draft letter to the Honorable Ravi Kalin, Minister of Housing, with a copy to Tom Shapika, MLA Cooney East, requesting an urgent low-income senior housing in Cranbrook? I get a mover? Councillor Lissette, seconded by Councillor Stetsky. Discussion? All in favor? Carried. All right. Moving on to item 8.8. The next item is from the CAO's office regarding daycare spaces. Can I ask Mark to provide a brief overview of the report?
Great, thank you again. So this letter and report is just a further to the discussion that already occurred with council at the September 6th Committee of the Whole meeting. So in that meeting, we discussed with council some of the opportunities and options, and the resulting direction from council is just here in front of you to formalize that. Number one, we'd like to have council approval to send a letter to the school district number 5 that you have attached in further to the letter that council sent in June. And that letter basically supports school district number 5 as now part of the Ministry of Education and Childcare, that they take the lead on developing childcare spaces within the school properties so that parents can drop kids off before school to attend the before school care, go to school, and then be picked up at the end of the day at the after school care, rather than ferrying back and forth to multiple locations. That was the June 28th letter. We haven't had a response yet on that. And so this letter is just to formalize a request to school district number 5. Number one, if they're planning to do before and after school daycare spaces. And number two, if they're planning on doing all day childcare spaces. And then with that information, with all of the funding opportunities available for building facilities in Cranbrook on properties for childcare, there has been some discussion and proposals around use of some city lands for the development of a childcare facility. And to formalize that, we would put out with council approval an expression of interest, just a really simple 2-pager kind of thing, where we're looking to see if there's a provider that would have an idea of a target piece of city land, irrespective of its current use or attachment to a current facility or within a facility, that might work for them, just to get an idea out there with that land or piece of facility or attachment to a facility, this grant funding that's listed in the report, and their ability to attract early childhood educators, which is the other big problem, is getting the staff. If they can put that in a proposal, then council will know 2 things. One is, what's the school district doing? And 2, if there's proposals that if the school district isn't moving on these things, that council could look at what the city might want to do. So that's what's in front of you tonight.
Okay, thank you, Mark. Can I get a motion that council directs staff to send the attached letter dated September 11th, 2023 to the school district number 5 board? Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Popoff. Discussion. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And can I get a motion that council directs staff to issue a confidential call for expressions of interest for city land or facility space support to provide daycare services in the city? Moved by Councillor Popoff, seconded by Councillor Blissett. Discussion? Councillor Stetsky.
So is the intention that these both go forward now, or are we going to wait for a response from the school board first?
Acting Mayor, through to Councillor Stetsky, both would go forward now because it will take some time for us to do the expression of interest to get the information back. Council may or may choose to do something irrespective of what the school district is doing, but that way you have both pieces in front of you rather than a long delay should you get a unfavorable response from the school district.
Thank you.
Okay, anything further? Okay, all in favor? Carried. All right, next we have administration updates. We have a handful of administration updates tonight. The first is from Human Resources and Corporate Services regarding the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Project. Can I ask Andy, Amanda, and Molly to provide the administration update, please?
Thank you, Acting Mayor and Council. This evening, we are reporting on the progress that we have achieved on the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion project. Early in the year, we requested for resources to start the Diversity, Equity and Inclusion, and at the same time, work towards accessibility compliance in terms of the new legislation that came into existence back in June 2021. The accessibility stream of the project required us to have some compliance by September 1, and this is the update that we're providing today. We have pushed forward a lot, and I really want to express my appreciation. I'm just a project sponsor, but the project team has really worked hard on this to bring this to compliance as at September 1. And how we've done that is really fulfilling the preliminary requirements of the BC Accessibility Act in terms of making sure that the city has an interim committee that's going to continue to do more work towards the end of the year. Hopefully by the end of the year, we'll have a full fledged advisory committee. What we've just achieved this far is to make sure that when it comes to legislation, we can demonstrate that the city is really doing all the work that's required to be in full compliance. So we have also partnered with the RTEC. They are at a stage of creating a regional advisory committee right now. And that is part of the work that is going to ultimately have the RTEC, the region as a whole, as well as the city fully in compliance with the new legislation. The third point there speaks to a requirement for a community to have a feedback mechanism. We did provide in the package a framework that speaks to how, as a city, we will continue to do the work and at the same time open an avenue for the community to give us feedback to be part of the design of the accessibility structures in the city. So really, this is a key message, just to say, as we continue to do more work towards the end of the year, we want to report back that in terms of preliminary compliance, we are in a good position as a city and really have pushed a little bit ahead of other communities, thanks to the efforts of the team. The interim committee that we have put in place, Acting Mayor and Council, those are the members of the team there. We are having this committee simply to push the work forward towards the end of the year. We are very mindful of the fact that there's still some legislative compliances that we need to go into in terms of further consultation to the community. But this puts us in a very good position as a clear commitment to ultimately make sure that everyone is consulted and is participating in the final accessibility committee. So this, in a way, is an engine that continues to do the work that our community is expected to do towards full accessibility programs. You'll note that from that committee there is myself, there is Asla, that's from the library, who are also in a way an extension of the city. And they also have to have a compliance matrix as well as the library. Fred, Amanda, and Molly, these are the key members of the project at the city and internal team. Tristan, again, pulling over our airport because there is also that accessibility requirement from the airport. Chris knew we're trying to draw the knowledge that Chris has about the community and most of the amenities. Chris would describe and know them very well. So we're really trying to tap into that resource to help us engage the community and continue to build the accessibility framework. Quickly taking you through phases, Acting Mayor and Council. As I said earlier on, interim accessibility committee that is done, that's in place. The accessibility framework, which is a full framework of intentions and what the city is going to be doing from here on up to the end of the year, that is in place, that is in your package. Gathering community feedback, we have partly done this leading to the framework that we shared with you. We continue to do the community engagement in phase 2, and we will be coming back to council in December. Hopefully at that stage, it will be a complete accessibility committee. Right now, it's an interim framework. Phase 2 of our plan is to continue public engagement. This is going to happen from here on up to the end of the year. There's actually some sessions that are coming very soon, and the team has got some dates coming. We will continue doing the internal audit of policies and procedures, and also that way identifying the action plan for the accessible program for the city of Krempo. This piece answers the question that Councillor Graham asked my colleague here, Mike, about grants. When we complete the audit of what is available and what is happening, out of that process comes an action plan of what needs to be done. And it is that action plan that is has access to grants when we get to say, we've done the audit in the community, we've identified these things that needs to be improved on. And therefore, we're now requesting the grants to develop programs to create an accessible community. So we're hoping that by the end of the year, we'll have this data, we'll be ready to get into different options for grants and continue applying as it will. Bullet number 3, we'll finalize the Krempo 3-year accessibility plan, which is part of the legislative requirements for a community that is an accessible organization to have an accessibility plan. That is going to be coming with the final establishment of the Accessibility Advisory Committee in December. Summing up, Acting Mayor and Council, this is our plan. We have presented the framework today that puts us in compliance in as far as our intents and the progress towards ultimately having an advisory committee. We are doing that through the interim committee as things stand. We're progressing between September and up to December. We will be still working on the accessibility plan, which is going to be arising from community engagement, auditing our policies, and coming up with an action plan. And January 1, hopefully we'll be having that action plan in place. This is when we'll be getting much busier to start doing work in the community in terms of changing and developing accessible practices in our community. It could be amenities, it could be trails, it could be many other things that may be needed to be taken care of. And December 31, 2024, we do our first review after the first full year of being in operation, reviewing our accessibility action plan. We'll continue doing this work after every 3 years, and we are hoping that the first cycle of the 3-year plan will be done in 2026. And we really made sure this is a very brief presentation so that we don't keep you here for a very long night. And that really briefly is what we had for Mayor and Council today. I do have the team online in case there are any questions, we can tackle them on. Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Stetsky.
Very quickly, very important project. Is some of the funding for this supposed to come through city taxes, or are we hoping to get grants to implement all of the action plan, just in terms of our budget thinking?
Acting Mayor, through to Councillor Stetsky, the initial cost of the project, we did come to council and requested for resources. We will, to an extent, continue to come to council. However, we do see the possibility of tapering costs when we get to have an action plan that has straight access to grants. We might still have a request that is going to fund the diversity, equity, and inclusion piece because it's a two-pronged project. So the internal pieces might still require a bit of funding from taxes, but we will be coming back with that justification later.
Okay, anything further? Okay, thank you, Andy, for the presentation. That was great. The next update is from Recreation and Culture regarding Rock the Kootenays 2023. Can I ask Trevor to provide the administration update, please?
Good evening, Acting Mayor and Council. How are we tonight?
We're not exhausted. We're doing great.
I'll make this quick. So Rock the Kootenays, it was a fantastic weekend. And the backstory, the quick backstory on Rock the Kootenays is this is a festival that's happened in Western Canada for the last about 10 years now. And the company out of Saskatchewan, Saskatchewan Entertainment Group. I have been business partners with this person in the past, this company, and they looked upon Cranbrook as a future home for the Rock the brand. And we had the opportunity to run this last year. I didn't quite think we would be successful coming out of the pandemic. And we took the leap this year to pull off a successful festival, which absolutely turned out to be a smash hit. You know, some of the key factors that determine the success of this is, you know, the impact on the community, both from a culture standpoint and an economic standpoint. So with reports of hotels and campgrounds all being full and hearing stories from local business owners about, you know, busier hours than normal pre and post the event itself. The event itself brought together a plethora of volunteers, which I think has now set our base volunteerism in the community to help with future events. We specifically had some great help from the staff of the city of Cranbrook. So on a volunteer standpoint, many staff, managers, directors volunteered, as well as some of the staff that, you know, worked their regular shifts and came back and volunteered as well. The event itself would not have been a success without the city of Cranbrook, staff, both working and volunteering, and the public as well. But as you've seen in my update, we did see visitors come from all over. So Cranbrook technically only represented 41% of the you know, 10,000 tickets that were sold over that weekend, which is nice. Alberta represented almost a quarter of that. And, you know, the rest of BC being there as well. We had from as far away as Quebec and Yukon and Northwest Territories, as well as from Oregon and Washington State, some Idaho and Montana.
Okay, great. Thank you, Trevor. I got a couple questions here. We'll start with Councillor Stetsky.
So great event, really enjoyed it. Did hear complaints from some of the people that live in the apartments across Victoria. And their question is, can this be done in Moyer Park instead next year, if we're doing it next year?
Great question. I think we would all love to do this again next year. And, you know, looking at Moyer Park is an option, but, you know, there are challenges with Moyer Park itself, just be it its location and, you know, the vibrancy coming to somewhat of downtown Cranbrook. I think it's a small price to pay for some of those residents that may or may not like the genre of Canadian classic rock, but we definitely will search to see the viability of moving up to, say, Moyer Park or whatnot.
Hey, Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you. I guess one question I have is, what was our investment and how much did it cost us? Did we recoup that investment? And if we made profit, does that go back into a pool to help you build bigger, better?
I guess I have a few answers for you. So we technically didn't have an initial investment. We had an initial risk that we offered. the risk would have been somewhere close to the $50,000 mark, which is in the industry, it's not as big as that number sounds, knowing what this festival can produce. Was it successful in a financial standpoint? Yes. We are still working on the numbers. I am not 100% sure how the finances work, whether it rolls over into, procuring this particular event for next year, or it just works within the city's budget of procuring events in this fiscal calendar year. That's something I'll have to work out with CFO Osborne. But, and sorry, what was your last question, Councillor Graham?
No, that was it. And I guess a supplemental comment would be, I would hope that if we are successful with shows like this, that the money would stay in that pool to help bring in bigger acts that take a bit more risk, because we've made profit. My concern is that we cover our bottom line, which is the taxpayer money, where we do risk, and the profit on top of that would be great if that allowed us to use that to offset some risk to bring in a bigger show. That's all I was wanting to make mention of.
Great. Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor. So Trevor, you're right. You took some risk, and good on you for doing that. We also got lucky. We didn't have a 37-degree weekend. We had a little milder, so it was comfortable. And we also didn't have the wildfire smoke blowing through us. So we got lucky on a couple fronts, but I'll just chalk that up to your skill level of crystal balling it. This is exactly what we need for Cranbrook for our downtown revitalization, our downtown vibrancy. So I would suggest we continue to hold it where it was held this year. All the residents had ample time to know this was happening, and we're going to be going to meet our bylaw requirements. And the vast majority of the people on all our Facebook posts were raving of it, and a few were saying, gee, kind of didn't like the sound. But this is our downtown vibrancy, and we need more of this. It was sort of at the end of our summer, and we got lucky with that. We got a great turnout. I can hardly wait for year 2 and year 3 and year 20, if I'm still around, to be doing, but just no funk, okay? Seeing the turnout from outside of Cranbrook and outside of British Columbia, I think, is showing that we're getting on the map, and we have to showcase our downtown. So I really support it and look forward to, as Councillor Graham says, maybe even taking some more risk and going forward. Do you have a theme for next year? Is it going to be country rock, maybe?
Oh, sorry, I lost you there. My internet conked out here.
Coincidental. Is it going to be country rock theme next year? Oh, he lost me again. No comment, eh?
Yeah.
Okay, Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. In the same vein, I just wanted to, what an awesome event in terms of community vibrancy. And, we definitely want folks to be buying tickets and enjoying the venue and supporting the food trucks. But it was actually really wonderful as well to see the people in the neighborhood who were out on their front porches listening. So many people. And that's, although we would love people to be buying tickets, hey, that's a great addition to community vibrancy. And as the nights went on, there were more and more people sitting on the grass across Victoria from the venue as well, which is just kind of joyful. So, I think, and I did hear, a comment from someone who was concerned about the noise living in the area, but actually said, hey, you know what? It was fine. It was great. It was done at 10. The last night went a little longer, but that's how it goes on the last night. I think there might have been some extra encores or two. So I just think, there was a real ripples of community vibrancy, and well done to everybody involved.
All right, thank you, Trevor. Councillor Ray stole my comments. I was going to say, for the few complaints we had, there was hundreds of people in the neighborhood enjoying the show from their balconies. So I'm a big fan of the location. Okay, we're going to move on. The next update is from Engineering and Development Services regarding the Housing Accelerator Fund application. Will this be Rob Veg or Mike Matika? Mike Matika will be providing this update.
Thank you, Acting Mayor Peabody. We feel like this update is a bit like acting like rock stars as well here in the city of Cranbrook, even though it's probably not going to get the same promotion immediately. So what we'd like to do is just provide council with an update, and there has been some discussions previously, but this is the formal update on the city of Cranbrook submitting an application to the CMHC Housing Accelerator Fund. The council did approve a staff recommendation to apply for this fund, and that would be for a total amount of $10.4 million in federal funding. And if we are successful, that would be used for initiatives to contribute to the development of affordable housing in the city of Cranbrook. Some of these initiatives were sort of on the longer term department and city corporate plan. And luckily, if we're successful, this opportunity will allow those things to happen much sooner and will allow a lot of those initiatives that otherwise would be covered by the taxpayer, or even having to look for a lot of piecemeal grant funding, would allow these all to be done, under one sort of umbrella funding application. There's several initiatives that are really anchoring this application, and those are really meant to facilitate housing growth, promote density and infill, incentivize the creation and legalization of secondary suites, create opportunities for accessory dwelling units, improve infrastructure, and increase the potential for speedier development approvals for affordable housing. So we are excited about this. We will be pushing out some more information as well along these items, and then we will hopefully come back to council in the coming weeks with an update on the application.
Okay, any questions for Mike? Okay, moving on. Thank you, Mike. The next update is from Public Works regarding the 2023 Water Smart Ambassador Summary Report. Can I ask Caitlin to provide the administrative update, please?
Thank you, Acting Mayor Peabody. We had Tegan Lee join us for a second year this summer as the Water Smart Ambassador. Her term was from May 8th to August 30th of the summer. She visited 13 classrooms in 4 different schools throughout the rest of the school season, doing education on water conservation for those students. She also completed 21 irrigation assessments throughout the summertime, which is going to residents' houses and going through their watering practices and looking at their manual sprinklers or automatic systems and refining those schedules for them. Through July and August, she conducted some monitoring throughout the community. So she worked with our bylaw services department and went through all of the different communities, and we're notifying residents if they were watering outside of the regulated times. This was really important with our different stages, as well as in July of 2022, we also had the new watering restrictions put in place. So it was a big year for education, as well as a big year in going through the different stages of the watering bylaw. From our bylaw services department, they were really happy to have her help this year. They've been quite busy with all the other priorities, so it was very helpful for her to be focusing on the water outside of the watering restrictions. And we have attached her final report for further information.
Great, thank you, Caitlin. Any questions or comments for Caitlin? Okay, thank you. Last for administrative updates. We have, Jason from Public Works regarding outdoor watering restrictions. Can I ask Jason to provide administrative update, please? Oh, sorry, we can't hear you, Jason.
How about now?
Coming in clear.
Okay, sounds good. Yeah, sorry, this is not as exciting as classic Canadian rock, but I think it got just as much attention through town. The water restrictions that happened this summer. Just part of our outdoor water use regulation bylaw is to update city council when the city does implement any water regulations. So this is kind of the little update of the summer. So yeah, we asked everybody to go on a voluntary stage 2 watering in July 14th. We did notice a small decrease in consumption at that time. But unfortunately on July 28th, we moved it from a voluntary to a mandatory stage 2, where we actually seen an increase in consumption during that time for a short little bit. So that was disappointing, but which also leads to other discussions. And then August 18th, we moved into a voluntary observation of stage 3 restrictions, just due to the level of the reservoir at the time. And then on August 24th, that's when the Ministry of Forests actually upgraded our drought level in the East Kootenay area from a level 4 to a level 5, and asking for that 50% voluntary reduction. And that's when we ordered the mandatory stage 3 restrictions. So going forward, we have seen a large reduction in consumption over the last few weeks. But unfortunately, just the creeks are not refilling the reservoir like we usually seen in the past. So yeah, we're just kind of holding steady at that minus 60 inches part right now. So yeah, that's the report that I have for you. Any questions?
Any questions or comments for Jason? Okay, Councillor Graham.
Yeah, thank you, Jason. I have a quick question for you, and I think it might address a bit of the confusion when we went to stage 3, and there was a bit of conversation around people laying sod, or not necessarily people, but businesses laying sod, like landscapers. That's their job. And when I look at the attachment of the water restrictions, the little magnet thing that's in our report attached to the final update for the final report for WaterSmart, it isn't the same as what we have on the website. And so I'm curious to know which one is correct, because one states commercial stage 1, or they follow stage 1 when they're in stage 2, but stage 2 when we're in stage 3. But this one doesn't address any of that. So I'm just curious, we've got 2 different graphics out in the community. Which one is the correct one? And that might alleviate some of the stresses that we had.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, Councillor Graham, through the acting mayor. Yeah, we did make some adjustments to that pictorial through the summer, and the one that is on the website is the latest updated and correct version.
Perfect, thank you.
Jason, I had a question for you. Looking at the level of the reservoir today and how low we are, I wonder if it would be a better practice, instead of starting with stage 1 water restrictions, then when we realize that the reservoir is not filling up, moving to stage 2 and stage 3. What if we started the season off with stage 2 water restrictions, see how the season goes, and then in the summer, if the reservoir is at a good level, we can go down to stage 1 or steady at stage 2, or then move to stage 3.
Acting Mayor Peabody. Yeah, during this summer, like, this is the first summer that we've actually had this bylaw. It was just recently passed just last fall. So through this summer, we are collecting a lessons learned log, where we will be reviewing everything that happened this summer, and possibly coming with some future amendments later this fall and winter. And we will look at stuff like that for sure.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, just looking at our community's consumption of water and sort of the lack of respect on the voluntary water restrictions. To me, it seems like we need to start retaining as much water as we can in the spring, with the hopes that we can, still use the reservoir throughout the summer. Those are my thoughts. Yes, Councillor Popoff.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. Jason, did we have our 3 production wells on full blast throughout the summer?
Councillor Popoff, to the acting mayor. Unfortunately, no, we did not have them going all 3 this summer. We did have one that failed early summer, and it's just been tough trying to get the parts and the resources to put that back in. So we were really only running off of the one deep well, because the other well, we were still also reclaiming it and flushing it to make sure that it's good quality water to go into the system. And that on that particular well 5, we only our operating permit only allows us to operate it for 8 hours a day.
Thank you.
Okay, anything further for Jason? Okay, thank you for your time. All right, we'll now move on to correspondence. The first item of correspondence tonight is from Tom Shapika, MLA East Cooney East, MLA for Cooney East, dated July 12th, 2023, regarding housing supply shortage. Any discussion? Motion, receive for information? Receive for information. The next item of correspondence tonight is from Jen Ford, a VBCM president, dated July 17th, 2023, regarding the province's response to the city's 2022 resolutions. Any discussion? Receive for information? We'll receive for information. Next item is of correspondence tonight is from Karen Johnston, group publisher, a Cranbrook Townsman, Black Press Media, dated July 18th, 2023, regarding advertising with Meta platforms, Facebook and Instagram. Any discussion? Councillor Stetsky.
I'm just wondering, looking at her ask that the city of Cranbrook use its economic clout and join its provincial Canadian counterparts around the world taking a stand, whether a CEO Fercho resolution might be worth putting in front of us around that. Not tonight, of course.
I guess my question back through Acting Mayor Peabody to Councillor Stetsky, is it like in a support sense or in a financial sense in terms of the purchase of ad space, or
Just a general support sense from my perspective, and or a letter back to her supporting what she's asking.
I guess that would be up to council, like, you know, if council would like to and have us, we could craft a letter for the next meeting. Just it's up to council to give me that direction. As far as dollar wise, we really don't spend anything there. It's
I was going to make that comment as for clarification. You know, even though we do post on our social media platforms, I don't think we ever boost any of those posts. So we don't really spend any money advertising on Meta. Councillor Ray.
Thank you, Acting Mayor. I would prefer just to receive this for information, and then I feel like this is a bit operational in terms of how we do marketing and stuff. I feel like that sits with operations, so I'd rather just receive it for information.
Okay, great. Receive for information. I have one shaking head. Yep, receive for information. Okay, next correspondence is from Jen Ford, UBCM President, dated July 26, 2023, regarding the Canada Community Building Fund, First Community Works Fund payment for 2023-2024. Any discussion? Receive for information? Receive for information. The next item of correspondence tonight is from Leonard Hebert, Chair, Peace River Regional District, dated July 31st, 2023, regarding the BC Wildfire Service firefighting equipment. Receive for information. We'll receive that for information as well. Last bit of correspondence here is from Galen Olsted. Managing Director of the Key City Theatre, received August 15th, 2023, regarding a request for support for EdFest September 9th, 2023. We have a recommendation motion with this item. Can I get a motion the council receive the correspondence from Galen Olsted, Managing Director of the Key City Theatre, received August 15th, 2023, regarding EdFest on September 9th, 2023. And further, authorize administration to provide the in-kind services in the amount of $134.50, which represents electrical services and the use of 10 garbage cans. Source of funds, council contingency. Moved by Councillor Ray, seconded by Councillor Stetsky. Discussion? All in favor? Oh, sorry. Councillor.
Great event and an amazing Ed float.
Yes, I would agree. Okay, all in favor? Carried. And this brings us to Mayor and Councilors' reports and inquiries. We will start with Councillor Graham.
Thank you. I'm just gonna pull up my notes because I can regale you from the summer's activities right through. Oh, okay, never mind. EdFest was great. Out there and seeing people enjoying the community and being downtown. Another critical part of downtown vibrancy and getting people moving around. So kudos to that, as Councillor Stetsky mentioned. And other than that, gearing up for UBCM next week, where I'll be running for second vice president. So hopefully I can secure that and be a voice for the Kootenays on the UBCM board.
Okay, good luck. Councillor Popoff.
Yes, thank you, Acting Mayor. I won't regale you with the summer, but just the last little while, it's been quite interesting, not just the Rock the Kootenays. We had the Fisher Peak Performing Arts doing our summer sounds every Thursday at Rotary Park. Great turnouts for that. EdFest, etc. One thing that to note is we also made the map across British Columbia back in the end of August. We held the Kimberley Cranbrook Rocky Mountain Rogues Rugby Football Club held the big provincials, and we're the third-time champions in a row, so it's a three-peat. And just to see the vibe and bringing rugby to Cranbrook at that level, and the people from out of town and all the other foreign accents, of course, because everyone's a foreign European or South African or Aussie or Kiwi that also played the sport. So it put Cranbrook on the map, and I'm proud that Cranbrook Kimberley Rocky Mountain Rogues came in first place again for the third time in a row. And I won't talk about the Grand Fondo, which was another great success this weekend and everything else, but we're creating vibrancy in our community, and that's positive way going forward. So well done to staff and all the other volunteers.
Fantastic. Councillor Ray.
Thank you. Just to reiterate, wow, this Saturday was a busy day in Cranbrook. So there was a fetal alcohol spectrum disorder event for FASD Day, and that was prior to EdFest. And it was really great to see there was mutual back and forth marketing for each event. Come to the FASD event and then head to EdFest. And similarly, the Kootenay Rockies Grand Fondo, in part of their promotion, says come do the Grand Fondo, do the big ride, and then head over to EdFest. So it's just so great to see that collaboration among various events. And I know that's just going to continue and get stronger. So congratulations to everybody involved. Just a special thanks. Today we had a tour of some of our key water infrastructure, and I feel so fortunate and very confident in the knowledgeable and experienced management and staff team that we have working on our key infrastructure, and want to thank everyone for helping certainly increase my knowledge level, and very fortunate that we have this excellent team here in Cranbrook.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Ray. Councillor Stetsky.
Yeah, thank you. Lots of great events. I just want to congratulate Fisher Peak Performing Society for moving the event to Thursday. I think it was really successful. On Wednesday at 1 o'clock is the funeral for Amy. And I know it's right in the middle of our budget discussions, but Amy Woonstrek was such a great part of our community for so many years. And so I'm going to skip out for a little bit and go to the funeral at 1 o'clock. He certainly will be missed. Quick question for Mark. We're talking about density all the time and making things denser in terms of development, which I absolutely support. But I'm wondering whether, and it should be done perhaps through a notice of motion, but I would like us to actually look seriously at whether we can do time-limited up densitying, so that if a developer, we approve the increase in density, they have 3 years to develop it, or it goes back to the original density. And it might take a legal opinion, but I think that's important, and it came up again tonight, a little further out of town than I like, but it's still an important question. If we say yes to a developer and increase the density, can we time limit it, and then to encourage development, because it's so tiresome to see all of this increase in density being approved and then nothing happening on those sites. So would that be potentially a notice of motion, or is it something?
Not necessarily. So your mayor, or acting mayor Peabody through to Councillor Stetsky, we've kind of looked into this one to a degree, and I will bring back a formal response from staff, but just to keep in mind that council, when it comes to zoning, it's council's purview to up zone, down zone, left zone, right zone at any point at time. That's one of the unfettered rights of a council that is sort of untouchable in the world of law. And it would just be a matter of, developing some internal policies or whatnot that council may want to follow around there, but I'll bring back a more fulsome.
Okay. So I just want to make sure there's no legal implications if we downzone something that we've upzoned?
You know that, just back to sort of one of the cornerstones in law is council's unfettered right to change zoning. However, the only time courts will get involved is if you've made a zoning change that is inconsistent with the OCP. Then a court will overturn if someone complains, but failing that, if it's consistent with the OCP, so if, for example, council would just need to ensure that that protocol is followed, you have the unfettered right to upzone or downzone, with the exception of rezoning to institution or park, which is tantamount to expropriation. Otherwise, council can do that. It's not something that's typically done. Usually rezonings are driven by the landowner or the developer for a site versus council. But like I said, I'll have a little more of an admin update on that for you.
Councillor Blissett.
Thank you. Along that line, I was wondering, maybe not for this meeting, but for the next meeting, if we could get an update on the low-income building that we approved adjacent to the Agnes McCoy building. That I wonder where it's at. Yeah, for next meeting, that'd be great. Also, I'm sure staff have noticed the graffiti on the side of the manual training center on brick. And it'd be nice if it was dealt with. I don't know if there's a reasonable solution to that. I've been told it may be quite difficult, but I don't know.
Certainly we'll action that. So bylaw has been notified as well as parks. So we'll have a crew on that as soon as we can.
Yeah. I mean, I understand, people were upset about what happened to this young woman, but certainly graffiti on a brick building is not an appropriate way to express your grief, and that moving forward. Yes, so anyways, participated. EdFest was great. Actually, 5 Alarm Funk was really good. Rocking there. So that's good. And yes, there's a variety of taste in music out there, and it's nice to have a variety instead of just all folk or whatever at different times. And I just want to plug the Glorious Sons coming here on November 16th. I saw them in Ontario 2 years ago, and I have never seen, it's a full throttle rocking show. And they played to sold out crowds across Ontario this summer too. And I didn't get to go again. I would have, and I'm going on November. So just a little plug for those of us who are young at heart and also young too. Anyways, thank you.
Okay, thank you, Councillor Blissett. I was also at the Ed Fest, and I thought the Key City Theatre did a great job. I talked to Galen briefly, and he said, he mentioned that I'm partly to blame for him putting on this fall festival because I brought it up at a budget meeting. I don't know if it was last year, or the year before, about maybe passing on the buck from city staff onto the Key City Theatre, and maybe also moving some budget to the Key City Theatre and have them sort of organize the fall festival, kind of right on the curtails of their success with the children's festival. Galen and I talked about this again just this past Saturday, and he said, although this Ed Fest was fully funded through grants, next year's may not be. So this might be something that we may have to discuss this upcoming budget meeting, that if we want to see events like this, how are we going to fund these events? But that'll be a future discussion. Right now, we'll just say congratulations to the Key City Theatre for putting on such a fantastic event and having it grant funded. That's fantastic. So with that, we're at the end of tonight's meeting. Oh yeah, I don't see him on the screen anymore. Mayor Price, are you still with us? Okay. So can I get a motion to adjourn the meeting? Councillor Blissett, Councillor Ray, all in favor? Carried.